Okay, we are live, I believe. Seems to be working. Excellent, excellent. All right, so we have to send out our usual communications and do that. Let everybody know that we're here, and then we'll get rolling. Give me 1 second here as we let Facebook catch up with us. Give me 1 second here, folks. And gotta do my due diligence here. Make sure everybody knows that we're on. Hope everybody's having a good Saturday. Mr. Lane, hey, good to see you, good to hear from you. We will be announcing some stuff this morning. It's going to be cool, it's going to be fun, including this. You all know what this is, right? Look, we have two of them. It's a new device. Actually, it makes kind of a cool crown, doesn't it? All right, give me 1 second here. Sorry, still doing the sharing things to particular groups. Hope everybody is doing well this morning, and in light of the current situation that we're all in, hope you're feeling well, and unfortunately, if you are affected, either directly or indirectly, family member, what have you, we wish them health and a speedy recovery. You yourself too, if you're going through the current sickness that's going around, and hopefully will be a little bit of a distraction for you today. So you have our well wishes and our positive thoughts, and yeah, so I'm almost done with the shares here. Like I said, there's groups that have expressed an interest that want to know when we're online, so that's what I'm doing right now. And again, just to remind everybody that I think we told everybody last week, we are actually streaming live in 3 different places at once, which is really, really cool. We're using a cloud-based service that's called Restream. I don't know if you all heard of that or not. If you have not, it's restream.io. Anybody that likes to do streaming, and of course we're about, we don't keep all of our secrets to ourselves. We like to let people know. So we use OBS to do the broadcast, set up our scenes, the switching. So like for example, when I go to the table camera here, there's a hotkey for that. And now we're on the table camera looking at stuff, and then we go back to the main camera. This is all handled through OBS, it's an open source broadcasting software, completely free. And then we do pay for a service through restream.io, so we can stream multiple channels at once. So if you all, like I said, if you're all thinking about doing any kind of live stream, we have quite the setup here that we are doing. Excuse me. And it's pretty cool. It's pretty fun. And if you have any questions about how to set it up, by all means, let me know. Been using it for about a year now. Not Restream, the OBS software. Okay, I think that was our last share. So let's go ahead, close this down. The fewer windows you have open, probably the better. Excuse me. So we're just going to close everything. And then there's a cool nifty little, actually, you know what, I can show you this real quick. Let me, because we have OBS set up to do so. So you can see here, if you look at my screen, hold on just a second. Sorry, I changed monitors here, so it's a little bit. Hold on, let me adjust this on the on my setup. There we go. Okay, so this here, as you can see, this is the Restream interface. All right, and then it comes with this nifty little Restream chat, which will collect chats from all of the channels that you're streaming on, and then you can manage your streams and your interactions directly right here, without having to have a number of windows open for different platforms. Pretty nifty, pretty nifty. Okay, back to the build stuff. Okay, so what are we doing today? Well, when we left off last week, I think it was last weekend, I thought that I would get a little bit further on this build here than I did, but never mind. It was a busy week. I do have a day job, so needless to say, most of my attention during the week goes to that, and then nights and weekends, I'm here in the shop. So, if you were with us last week, you know that we were starting off building a reverse bear trap. I decided that instead of building one, why not go ahead and build two bear traps at the same time. Double our efforts, kind of do a time study to see how long it takes me. And so far, with cutting out the pieces and building this here, we're up to about 6 hours total. So, obviously, I'll split that in half when we're done, figure out how long it takes me to build one of these babies. And I do sell them on my Etsy store. So, part of the time study is also to figure out if we're profitable making these things. Yeah. So, this afternoon we are going to be streaming a second time. And oh, a word on that. So I will make a posting on the various platforms, whether it's YouTube, Twitch, or Facebook, and eventually Twitter through Periscope. I will be making an announcement and pinning it to the page so you all know. I was trying to do a 10 to 12 stream starting last weekend, but it's not really working out with my morning schedule on Saturdays, so we're actually going to try and move everything. Figure that the 10 a.m. with my responsibilities in the morning, 10 a.m. is a little bit early, so we're going to be I'll make the announcement. We'll pin it. I'll pin it to the page. But we'll be doing 11 to 1 in the mornings, and then in the afternoons, probably 4 to 6, unless we do a shortened stream. It'll be like 4 to 5 or 5 to 6. But most likely, like I said, we're going to try the 11 to 1 in the mornings, and then the 4 to 6 in the afternoons. So. This afternoon, before I come back, I will go ahead and bevel these discs here to make the to make the gears. And as you can see here, I'm going to switch over to the table view. There we go. As you can see here, we have a bucket load of parts that I've cut out. I've gone ahead and glued pieces that need to be doubled. I'm going to run these through the sander too. Again, I don't have the belt sander in the house. It's out in the garage. So I will go ahead and prep these this afternoon. We'll do major construction on this thing this afternoon after I get these pieces prepped. So, let's see. So that's that. I'm not going to mess around with these. We're just going to push these off to the side because this morning I'm going to show you how we make the bolts. Let me see. I should have a picture here that I can show you because if you've seen the bear trap that we did before, the bolts were actually made out of foam. And let me pull that up real quick so you can see. me 1 second. There it is. All right, let me jump screens here so you can see what I'm looking at. So you see these bolts here? They're a little bit more of a an acorn head bolt. So that we used to do these out of foam. So if you look at the picture on Etsy that we had, you can see the foam type bolts. And while those were fine for the moment, we have. Let me show you. I'm going to show you some more pictures here real quick. Let me get this set up. Okay, there we go. That's a little easier. All right, here we go. So, this is ultimately what we're building. And there's a better picture or a better view of the bolts with the acorn bolt heads and the threads. Okay, so what we've done is we've hold on, I need to bring my chat forward here so I can see if people are asking questions. Yeah, so what we've done is we've excuse me, we have created a mold that will allow us to pull these bolts, to make copies of these bolts. Basically, I just went to Home Depot. All right, let me get that close. I don't know if the camera's going to focus on it that close. Maybe not. Let's try switching cameras. Maybe that'll work. This is prior to them being cleaned up and trimmed to fit. So the end, obviously, there looks a little ratty, but supports the concept. All right. So again, bolts with bolt heads. Took some Mold Star from Smooth On. Excuse me. Suspended the bolts, put them into kind of a little jig, and suspended them in a cup, and then poured the Mold Star around them. Once the Mold Star cured, I went and took a very sharp knife and then split the mold down the side so we can open it up and pull our bolts out. All right, because they have this head on them, it would be really difficult to pull it out. In fact, probably pretty near impossible, because they're difficult to get out even with the mold split like this. All right, so we're going to go ahead and cast some of those this morning. We need about, let's see, about 14 or 15 per mask, and right now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we need about 30 total. And then I use rubber bands. These are these 1/2 inch rubber bands. I think there's number 64 is the size. And then I use that just to hold the mold together so it doesn't leak out the slits there that I created to get the bolts out when we're pouring the resin in. Okay. There we go. So we're going to cast some of these babies. Also, I'm going to show you some new things that we're releasing here in conjunction with, and I showed it last week, but I want to show it again because we're going to be working on one of these here too. Pretty neat. This is a piece that's built in conjunction with, it was designed for and built in conjunction with Dark Creations ATX. company out of Austin, Texas. Adam Lane heads that shop up, and he approached me about building some horror devices, if you will. The saw, actually, reverse bear trap mask from saw was one of those items. But then we also came up with this little bit of funness. All right, so here we go. I'm going to pop you over to the screen. We are calling this cage face, and it is a torture looking device that you can wear and team it up with a costume if you like. You obviously can just wear just that around if you want. And this is what it looks like. Let me see if I can pull that up real quick. What it looks like on a person. If I can find the picture, give me a sec. Alright, so on a person, that's what it looks like. Yes, I know. I didn't say it was pretty. So we're gonna be building one of these. This uses the same bolts that I use in the saw, the reverse bear trap mask, and this is upwards around 40 bolts if I remember correctly. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times 6 is 33 bolts. So good thing we have a mold for that to make those bolts. And we are going to be messing around and building one of those. There's some other stuff too that we're going to be releasing here in the very near future, and we'll turn you on to that as it drops. We're going to be kind of doing some things a little bit differently too when it comes to things that we have in our store. But like I said, when that drops here probably within the next week, we'll make announcements and turn you on to that. And yeah, so let's go ahead and start working on some bolts here. So first thing we need to do, which I've already done, is make sure that our mold is nice and clean, that we've removed any errant pieces out of there from the previous castings. All right. Now if you've seen me cast the gauntlets and the finger pieces for the Iron Man gauntlets before, it's pretty straightforward. They're little cup molds as well, and they're open, and it's really difficult to get an air bubble trapped in there. Probably the biggest drawback to casting these bolts is because they're really skinny and they're a little bit deep in there, so there's a good chance that you'll get air bubbles. Now I do have pressure pots that we could put these into and hit it with an air compressor, and I probably should, but the way that we've been doing it has been working pretty well, so we're just going to go ahead and stick to how we've been doing it in most recent days. Like I said, I have pressure pots. For those of you who don't know what a pressure pot is, let me show you one. This is an example of a pressure pot. Basically, it's got a gauge on it on the front. There's a valve over here, a valve here that you can obviously let the air in. You plug an air compressor hose to this here, and then open it up gradually till you get about 35-40 pounds of pressure. Which is typically enough to put the resin in under pressure and eliminate air bubbles. So you just stick this in here, and I guess I can show you in here. It's a little dirty, but from past castings. And that goes under pressure and forces the air bubbles out. Now that usually works best if you're using a resin that is a bit of a slower cure. And I kind of moved away from using these on the gauntlets, the cup molds for the gauntlets, and the finger pieces, mainly because 65D is a resin that sets up pretty quickly. And you know, stuff like this. This is a flat mold. I mean, literally, you just pour it in there. And I can show you this mold, just to give you an example. This is the mold for our arc reactor ring. And I mean, you just mix the resin up, pour it in there, and give it a little shake, and you can literally see if there's any major air bubbles in it. And you can poke them with a pin if you want, or again, just give it a little shake until they rise to the surface. But we also use a resin that is a slower cure, which has a tendency to give the bubbles time to work out. And if you use a pressure pot, same thing. You have more time once you put it under pressure for the bubbles to escape. 65D, which is what we use for slush casting on the helmets and the gauntlet pieces, is a pretty fast cast resin. So you don't, by the time you get it mixed and into the molds, it's already starting to cure. So the bubbles aren't going to move around too much. Started out using that resin because it is it's a self-leveling resin. So the bubbles, it has a tendency not to build up too much in the way of bubbles, which is also which is good. 305, which is what we use for the bolts because it's a slower cure. This here has a cure time, 7-minute pot life and a 30-minute cure time, whereas 65D starts to set up in like 10 minutes. So like I said, if you count mixing and pouring, getting the stuff into the molds, you're about a minute or two away from from the stuff starting to harden up on you. All right, so let's grab a set of gloves. Always protect your hands as much as you can, because we are using chemicals. I bought these gloves quite a while ago, like months ago. That's how long it takes me to get through a box of gloves. I'm not even sure if you'd be able to buy gloves out there now with everything that's going on. All right, it doesn't take a lot of resin, and it's always, in my opinion, better to start with a little and not have enough than to have too much and waste it. So it's about, I'm going to mark both of my cups here because this resin is like 65D. The 305 resin is a mix by volume and not weight. And then I'm just going to write a Y and a B so I know which one is blue and yellow to start with. Blue and yellow referring, of course, to the color of the containers. Okay, so we've got our B and our Y. We've got our gloves. Alright. And then we're going to grab a mixing stick. Yeah, we'll just reuse this one. And a mixing cup. We're actually going to be making quite a few bolts today. And then a small hypodermic or syringe. It's industrial use only. I'm not exactly sure. This is a 12cc. Comes with a thinner tip, little metal tube tip that you can use to inject the molds with, which is really a great idea because the further down you can get this resin to start with, the less chance you have of bubbles forming than just letting it run down the mold. It's been my experience. Alright, this yellow stuff has a tendency, oh, we got lucky. Sometimes it hardens up and makes it difficult to open the container. Give it a good shake. Make sure the stuff is really mixed because if you don't, it'll fail. Alright, open that over the garbage. There we go. I don't have a whole lot in here, but fortunately we do have another couple of containers. Alright, we'll see if we have enough for this casting. These containers feel a bit light. And, oh, so close. I'm going to let it go because I think we might actually get there. Just let it drain here a second. Yep. We had just enough. How about that? Alright, let's see how accurate we have been in our measurements if we have just the same amount of yellow. Pretty close. Pretty close. Alright, so here's our two parts. Now, we don't have to, but I like to throw a little colorant into the resin, and the reason is because if the paint ever scratches off, if you let this stuff just cure the way naturally the way it is, it's a yellowish white. 65D is more pure white. I'd throw a few drops of colorant in it, in this case black. It won't be true black, it'll be more of like a, dark gray. If I can show you again one of these bolts that we've done. So the nice thing is if the paint ever rubs or scratches off, you've got this color underneath it rather than a stark white color coming through. So that's why we throw a little colorant in it. Doesn't take a lot. I'm going to put about 3 drops in here. Okay. This is also made by Smooth On. It's made specifically for the resin. All right. So first thing we'll do is we'll mix up the colorant in our first part here. I put the colorant into the blue resin because the blue resin, or the stuff that comes in the blue bottle, is typically thinner, so it mixes easier as far as the coloring agent goes. Scrape the sides off. Okay. And I'll just lay that over there because we will need it. Actually, I can just put it in the cup. And in we go. Now, with 65D, because that stuff has such a short pot life, you got to move kind of quick. And I like to say as soon as you do the pour and mix the resins, the clock is ticking. Fortunately, with this stuff, the pot life is long enough where you have a little more working time, so it's not as urgent to get it into the mold, but the pot life is only 10 minutes. So it's not like you can, mix it up, go get a sandwich, walk the dog, and come back and still use it. With 65D, to do an entire set of gauntlets out of one batch of resin, I'm not even talking, I'm just cruising. Anybody that's watched me do a casting on video here before knows I'm like, okay, I'm not going to talk a lot when I do this because speed is of the essence, or time is of the essence, and we need speed. All right, so you want to make sure you get a good mix. Scrape down the sides of your container as usual. Make sure you get it all mixed up. All right, we'll tap off our mixer and get our little syringe here. Put it face first in the resin, fill it up. And then I'm going to put about a quarter of this syringe into each one of these holes to just get it started. Okay. And the reason is because after we get these filled up about halfway, we're going to do a little dance, a little tap dance. All right, so we're just going to take it, pound it on the table a little bit. What we're doing here is any air bubbles that might have worked their way in with the resin will rise to the top. And then we won't have any irregularities in our castings. Before I took this route, and I was actually using 65D, and it cured way too fast in the mold, I'd get bolts that, like, would have half of the bolt missing halfway down. They were still usable. I mean, I can use some of these bolts. I use just the head. I'll clip off and just use the head. So they didn't go to waste. But I was just like, okay, we can't use 65D anymore. And I talked to the guys over at Smooth On. I'm like, all right, what do we use for a slower cure? And they turned me on to a couple of products, and here we are. All right, same thing. We're going to go ahead now and fill this up just to the top. And I like to bring it just to the top. Try not to overfill it. And the reason is because I'm going to do a tap again, and I want to see if any levels of the resin go down. Okay. Got a little bit of resin left over. I'm going to do the tap again. Doesn't need to be anything too dramatic. Like I said, just enough to give that bubble a chance if there is any in there. Its way out. And you don't want to shake it so much or bang it so much where you create bubbles. All right. Now I use what little bit of resin I got left here. A couple of them did go down, which tells me we did have an air bubble or two in there. All right. And when you're getting into molding and stuff, if you want to be sure that you don't waste your materials, get really familiar with your molds and how much the mixing containers that you're using, how much of the resin is required. Because if you get good at it, you won't waste hardly any resin at all. Nothing like an empty cup. All right, so now we'll go ahead and put this aside. We'll grab a little bit of isopropyl rubbing. So this will be my mixing cup for the resin. I'm going to go ahead and clean that out. Wipe the stick off so we can use it for our next one. I'm just going to wipe out a little bit of extra we got here. There we go, nice and clean, ready for the next casting. I'm going to fold this paper towel up, the clean side. Alright, and then just a dash of rubbing alcohol in our container here so we can clean our syringe. Clean it with the tip on. Just run the alcohol through there. Run it through a couple of times. And then I have a little piece of copper wire. After I take this tip off, I can run this piece of wire through the tip just to make sure that there's no resin caught in there. Okay, and now that is ready for our next casting as well. Put that aside. And now with the tip off of it, I'll go ahead and run the alcohol through the syringe just a couple more times to ensure that it's nice and clean. Don't leave the plunger in it. You want to pull that out and wipe it off because the alcohol will break the rubber down on the end of your syringe and shorten the life of it. You don't want that. And then you can see we've still got a little bit of resin caught in the end there, so I'll just take my paper towel and push it in. And get that last little bit of resin out of there. Like so. Take care of your syringes. These things aren't cheap on eBay. They're not expensive either, but if you use them a lot and you don't take care of them, then they could get a bit pricey. I've got some syringes. Actually, that little one that I just used to do this casting, I probably used that one, I don't know, 3 or 4 months at this point. All right. So I'm going to show you with the bolts that we do have. What we're going to do now is I'm going to show you how these bolts go into our bear trap mask jaws. Okay. So here's our bolts. We are going to need a set of, or something to cut the ends off. I like to use these because they're nice and flat. You can use these. Another thing that I like to use from time to time is, let me find it here. Oh, it was on the shelf. Hold on one second. It is. It's just behind something else. This is a this is a PVC pipe cutter, which we'll actually be using to cut the length of the pipe that goes over the or next to the head on one side of the mask. But I like to use this, and I think these are like 12 or 13 bucks at Home Depot if you want one. So I'll just use it to cut the ends off first, because that's the first thing we have to do is get this ready to go into the mask. Alright, see, makes a nice clean cut. Alright, so let's go ahead and mark where these are going to go. And I like to go about halfway the distance from the inside of the mask or the jaw to the curve here. Alright, so I'm going to go about right here. So that'll be where one of our bolts go. And we have 6, so we have enough to do one side. Let's go ahead and we'll put one here. And here. And there. Alright, so that's where they'll go through on the top. And then on the inside, I'm going to mark just put a little spot right here in the center. I'm not sure if you can see that. The light is not helping us much. There we go. So I'm just going to mark in the center here, because we're going to recess that just a bit to receive the bolt after we drill our holes. Okay. Let's grab our Dremel. Might as well grab the glue gun. I'm going to need that too. And I know there's people on the Ryobi channel that would love to see the Ryobi glue gun in play. So there you go. Alright, I have a cup here with my most often used bits. Let's go ahead and any kind of drilling bit will work, because we're just gonna, it's foam. We're just gonna cut a hole in it, and then we're gonna use the bit at a lower angle to create the recessed. I should probably turn the glue gun on. Recessed little divot that we can then drop the bolt into. All right. Again, remember you're drilling through foam. Doesn't take a lot of pressure. I'm just going to route it out a little bit here. Something like that. If you don't have a Dremel, of course I do recommend that you get one. But another thing that you could do is heat up a soldering iron and just push it through here and make a hole that way. Actually, when I was a kid, I didn't have a soldering iron or a Dremel, and I used, if I needed to solder something, I actually took a big doornail and I would heat it up over the stove until it got really hot, and then I'd hold it with a pair of pliers and use that as my soldering iron. So you do what you can with what you got, right? Alright, so there's our holes on the top. Hello, Mr. Camel. Good afternoon to you. Alright, so we're going to make a little divot here now. Just lay it down on the side. It doesn't have to be anything overly dramatic. I just like to create a little divot so when we glue that bolt in, it's not just sitting on the surface. Now, I'm going to try I've got a bit here that actually has a point to it. It's more of a sanding bit. But again, this is foam, so you could probably use something that had no grit to it and it would still make a hole or an impression. Just take a little more pressure. I've been wanting to try this for a while. I just never did. Yeah, that works nicely. The hole's a little more, or the indent's a little more graceful too, as you can see. Hopefully you can see. There it is. Okay, so we've got our indents. Now all that's left, oh nice, my hot glue is leaking as it warms up onto my bolts. No reason to panic, I'll just wipe it up. Isn't hot glue fun? Can't tell you how many times I've been burnt by that stuff. Alright, now, what we need to do is we need to pretty much, oh, hold on, I've got the spiderweb thing going here, if you know what I'm talking about. Let's wipe the end of that off. There we go. Once it starts, it never stops. So for anybody watching the channel, again, just to remind you, we are streaming to 3 different platforms. So, you know, obviously if you're watching on Facebook, you already know that we're here, but we also have a Twitch channel and a YouTube channel. We're actually YouTube. We have a bunch of other videos too from the past that we did, build videos, review videos, and stuff that we've done for different products and things that we built. So if you want to head over there and subscribe and check it out and watch some videos when we're not around, you can do that too. Alright, so right now I'm just trimming the ends of these bolts off. So we can poke them through our mask. Again, this is a PVC cutter, but it sure does make short work of cutting through other stuff too. Excellent. All right. So now, oh, and I just realized I didn't tell you guys something here about the jaws. So if you look in here, you'll see that there's a lot of hot glue along the edges here, where the pieces join together. Let me turn this here. All right. So you see the hot glue here. And basically what that is to emulate weld joints. All right. So once it's painted, this thing will actually look like looks like it was welded together. It's a pretty nifty little trick. Okay, so I'm going to stick our bolt here through the hole and then into the recess that we just created. And I'm going to look at that, and it looks like we need to trim off probably about a ½ inch off the end of that bolt to make it fit. All right, so let's go ahead and pull the bolt back out. Now if you want to measure it before you cut it, feel free to do so. I'm pretty good at eyeballing it. Again, if you're not good at eyeballing it, then break out the measuring tool. Always cut it long if you're not sure, because you can always cut more off. Of course, you can't add easily, I should say. I don't want to say you can't, but it's not easy to add a length back to a bolt like this. and push it through, and that's where it sits. Let me get rid of these hot glue spider webs. They're everywhere, as we know. And there is our first bolt. I really got to do a better job with this lighting. Can't see anything. Hold on, let me move this right over here so it's kind of right over the camera. There we go. Is that better? Hopefully everybody can see that better. So that, again, there's our acorn-headed bolt, flush with the top of our jaw, continuing to the inside. Now, we'll go ahead and put some hot glue around the top and in our divot, and I'm cleaning these hot glue spider webs out of here because once the bolts are in place it'll be that much more difficult to do. So now is the best time to do that. Alright, that looks pretty clean. Got a little bit here on the edge. Alright, I believe the glue gun is ready. So I'm just going to put a drop in there, and then just a little bit around the top here. And push it through, push it into the divot, and then very quickly clean up the edge around here of any extra glue. And then when that dries, or not dries, but cools, we'll have done the first bolt. Again, I'm trying to get better at placing this so you can actually see what's going on. All right. Density, 4565. All right, so what density of foam do you use? You know what? Different foams have different densities, and a lot of people don't know that. So that's a great question. I currently use foam from 3 different suppliers. Actually, I'm sorry, 4 different suppliers. Just so everybody knows, what he's referring to is what's called shore hardness, all right, which refers to the density of the product, which refers to how much you can squeeze it, how much it'll compress, which also, for people that do what we do, belies, you know, the strength, or demonstrates the strength and the rigidity of the foam. I believe this is a shore hardness of 35, which most of the commercially available foams are. This is a foam by Yaya Han. I also use foam by SKS Props, Stephen Smith's product, TNT Cosplay, and then ultimately, for those of us on a budget, from time to time, I will also use, wait 1 second here to grab an example, translation to tear off an example, the Harbor Freight foam, or floor mat foam, as we're all fairly familiar with, by the destination that you go to get it. So it cuts well. It's a great foam. I do believe the shore hardness of this foam is a bit lighter. So if this were a 35, this is probably more like a 30. But it's still, you know, heavy duty enough where, and thickness of the foam will make up for the lower density as well. So that's something to keep in mind too. So that, again, that's a great question, and really, so the Harbor Freight foam, and again, this is less expensive foam. You do have to deal with the fact that you have a texture on the back of it, and you have, of course, these puzzle pieces, which are not a big deal. You just trim those off. But this this foam is, you know, it's a great foam. I mean, as long as the texture on the back isn't going to, you know, if you're not going to be showing both sides at once. So this is typically the inside, unless you like that texture. Other floor mat foams do have like a bigger diamond plate, which I'm obviously not a fan of that, unless you have something that needs a diamond plate texture on it. You can sand the texture off. I've heard of people doing that, but that just to me, um, that would just be a lot of work. Most of the Iron Man suits that I've built over the past 7 years, and I've built about in excess of 35 Iron Man suits of different models. This is pretty much the foam that I've used on almost all of them, and I've sold most of those suits to happy clients, and they were just fine with the quality and the finish and the paint and whatnot. So I have nothing against floor mat foam. I am looking forward to doing my first build an Iron Man suit out of this foam here, which is the little bit higher density foam, and the everything that I've built out of this stuff now really. It's really the premium foams. You will notice a difference when you start working with these. And I know some people that again kind of hate on the floor mat foam, but there's absolutely nothing wrong with this foam, especially if you're just starting out. It's inexpensive, and you get a lot for your money, so you can practice a lot, make mistakes, and not worry about wasting a sheet or two of foam to get your chops up. Hopefully that answered the question well enough. If not, ask away. I've got more answers for you. Let's put some more bolts into this thing. All right, so I'm just going to drop that in there, line it up. This looks like we need to cut off a little bit more. So I'm going to be the responsible builder. I'm actually going to grab my ruler here and show you how to measure to know how much to take off the other end. So this looks like it's about 21 millimeters. So I will take 21 millimeters off the end. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and just get the rest of our bolts positioned, and then we'll glue them all in at once. Thank you, that helps a lot. You're in the UK. Okay, you're in the UK. It's finding different phone. Yeah, TNT Cosplay actually has a sample pack they'll send out. I don't remember if it was free or if it was like really inexpensive, but if you just want to kind of get your hands on a premium foam and see what it feels like. So at least, even if you don't buy premium foam, at least you'll know, what that density feels like if you're looking to, to source it locally and find something comparable. All right, that looks to be about 10 millimeters off the end. Yeah, that shore hardness comes in handy for other things other than foam too. That's one of the parameters on dragon skin that we use to make the ribbing for our Iron Man gauntlets. Different shore hardnesses, if it's a softer or if it's a smaller shore hardness, if the number's smaller, it's squishier. But it'll also stretch further without breaking. So a lot of factors to take into consideration. A suit or an object that is made out of a foam that, for example, this foam, this foam here being a slightly, again, not terribly so, but a slightly softer foam, depending on what you're making out of it, would actually be a more comfortable, because it's slightly more flexible, bit of costume, costume piece to wear than something that's built out of foam like this, which has a lot more rigidity. Again, it's not like metal; it'll still bend, but you're going to notice that that rigidity a bit more when you put on your costume after you build it out of the two different types of foam. And like I said, I mean, the catalyst, one of the catalysts for this hobby slash profession, whatever you want to call it, is experimenting. You know, get foam from different sources and find out which one works best for you and your application. And I didn't know you were from the UK. I know obviously sourcing things overseas sometimes is, I speak obviously to the reference of working here in the States. So, sorry I didn't know that earlier. Alright, so here is our next bolt, and it looks like we're going to need to chop off about 18 millimeters. Alright. And our last bolt on the top here. You know what? Let's just go ahead and grab that. Measure it once it's out. $20 millimeters. Alright, so with a little bit, where'd my bolt container go? I have containers all over my desk for all sorts of things here. Alright, we have our bolts in place, or at least measured and positioned. So now we'll take these babies out one at a time. And put a drop of glue in there. Push that bolt into the glue. And then I'm going to just put a little glue behind the bolt here. I know I did it around the bolt earlier, but I didn't like the outcome of that. Just hold it in place here while it cools. This is an open forum, so anybody watching, if you got questions, don't be afraid to ask. That's why we're here. Not just to show you what we're working on, but to answer questions that you might have. Bear with me 1 second here. I'm going to make sure that our stream is still going through to our page. And looks like it is. That's good news. Alright, we're not going to keep that open because we don't want to share the data here. Drop our bit rate and then you guys won't be able to hear what I'm saying. We'll see what we're doing, either one. Alright, let's pop this bolt out. Actually, we don't even need to come all the way out. Just back it up a little bit. Spot of glue there. Spot of glue here on the back. Put the bolt back in. And one more bolt here on the end. This is the only glue I used to use when I first started building Iron Man suits. Back in the day, was hot glue, and this stuff is a pain. First of all, it's hot. Second of all, it leaves these little spider webs everywhere. And then on top of that, the glue has a certain viscosity to it that when you use it, it has a tendency to push the pieces apart. And so it creates gaps where your seams are when you put pieces together. And you can see those gaps typically a mile away. So now I use contact cement to stick the pieces together, and then I'll reinforce the seams with hot glue from the back, or in this case when we're emulating, welded seams. I'll use it for display purposes, but not as the primary adhesive, because like I said, there's just only so much you can do with hot glue. And it's great for what it's, what I use it for the reinforcement and for the decorative part, but yeah, this stuff is way better. Smelly, so make sure you use ventilation, good ventilation when you use it. All right, so we have our bolts across the top of one of the jaws of our mask. Only reason that we're not doing the other side is because we're still waiting for the bolts to cure in the mold. It's close, not quite. Probably another 15 minutes or so. All right, so now later on, I'm going to go ahead and just sit this off to the side here. Later on, we're going to be creating. And let me go back to the pictures, because it's probably a bit easier to show this than to explain it. Give me 1 second here. Okay, so look at my screen here. Got a couple of pictures of the bear trap. Let's try again. Okay, so you see these tubes here that are running along the top? And then if I open this picture up here, you'll see, you can't really see it from the back, but that's these tubes here. They're foam dowels that have wire inside of them, so we can shape them how we want to, and have them run, whichever way we want across the mask. In fact, the lock, if you look here, the lock is also, the top of the lock here is also created with a foam dowel with a piece of wire running through it. Now here's an example of the foam with wire in it. And as you can see, I can create just about any shape I want. And because EVA foam is flexible and forgiving, it doesn't retain any of the shape that I had before. And I mean, you can do just about anything you want with this. And it's pretty handy. Pretty handy. All right, I'm going to show you how to make that. So first thing you're going to need is wire. All right, this is 18 gauge galvanized steel wire. Okay, you're going to need that, and then of course we're going to need a foam dowel. Let me grab one of those. Got a whole package of them. This is the Yaya Han foam dowel. There's a lot of other people out there that make them. Here's an example from SKS. This is one of their foam dowels, a little bit bigger. Alright, do the same thing with pretty much any of these. But what we're going to do, first of all, is we're going to get a nice sharp blade. Alright. And we're going to take a little swig here. Gotta stay hydrated. Alright. I'm gonna move this out of the way for the moment because it's in the way. Same thing with our Dremel tool. Put that over here. Swap out our blade with the fresh one. And dispose of the used blade and something other than that. There we go. Alright. Now, first thing I want to do is measure out my length of the wire. I'm going to cut it just a little bit longer than my foam tube or roll here. I'm going to grab my wire cutters. And we'll straighten it out just a little bit. Actually, a lot of it. Let's try to get it as straight as possible. Alright, close enough. Now we're going to take our fresh, super sharp blade and we're going to split this foam without cutting all the way through it. Alright, so we're going to go about halfway through. And I'm going to look straight down from the top and try to keep the cut on the same side all the way down. We want to try to at least to the center of our foam tube here. Okay. And then we'll take it and split it open just a little bit. So just run your thumb along the slit there. Open it up, and it'll look like that. If we can get it open further, that would be better because we're going to hit this with some contact cement. Might need to cut it down just a little bit more. Try not to dig your thumbnail into the foam though, because you can dent it if you're not careful. think I went a little, like I said, you can always cut more. I was going to say I went a little too conservative on my first cut. But that just means I need to go back and cut a little bit more. All right. Foam does dull your blade quickly, so if you need to pause and throw a sharpen on it, do what you gotta do. There we go. All right, we actually went a little past center. As long as you don't cut all the way through, that's fine. All right, so we've got a slit cut into this. This foam is split open now, as you can see. We've got a nice channel running through there. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to do a little bit of glue here inside. Make sure we hit all the surfaces, both sides, and then we're going to run some glue along our wire here. Real simple way of doing that is grab yourself a paper towel. Take a little bit of contact cement here from our glue pot. Actually, on this, we're just going to put an amount here in our towel. And we'll come back to that. And then we'll just pull our wire through the glue. Alright. Don't need a lot. Try not to get it on your computer screen if you can help it. Contact cement and electronics don't really work well together. Again, just pull it through that towel with the glue on it, and then we'll set it aside over here and let that dry. While we now take our glue pot and run some glue along this channel here. Now you want to open this up enough where it doesn't glue itself back together before you get the wire in there. So that's the reason that I kind of stress this just a little bit, pulling my thumb through it, to guarantee as much as possible that it stays open after I hit it with the glue. If you get a little bit of glue on the outside of the tube, don't worry about it. Okay. Okay, there we go. We are set up for success. All we have to do is let that glue dry. So we'll give it a minute or two to do that. And I'm going to need a couple more of these tubes. So I think I'll go ahead and grab, actually I'm going to need a total of 3. Actually, you know what, if I remember right, I think one of these will do 1 mass. So we'll just do 2 for now. We'll split another one while we're waiting for that one to dry. Just to remind everyone who is watching, we will be picking up and doing another stream this afternoon. I was trying to do a schedule of 10 to 12. It's not really working out. We missed the time frame last week, and I did it again this morning. And I'm like, you know what? We're just going to move the morning stream from now on. It'll be 11 to 1. I will post this on the appropriate channels. 11 to 1, and then the afternoon stream will be 4 to 6 until further notice. All right. So once again, I'm going to look down from the top. Let's move this out of the way here. All right. We do have a group that is attached to this Facebook page. If you know about it, great. If you don't, it's called Foam Club. If you're not coming through Foam Club to watch this, Laughing Dragon Foundries, the page, of course, is kind of about what we're doing. At the same time, we have Foam Club, which is where we want to see what you're doing. So feel free to join, to be part of the group, and show us what you're working on. And of course, if you have any questions, build questions or otherwise, that would be the place to ask those questions. I'd like to think that we're starting to build a nice community of people that not only want to show what they're doing, show off a little bit, but also to be available to help out. Make us all better builders. Because as much as I do know, there's still a ton that I don't, and I look forward to learning from you guys too. Even if it's just asking me questions that I don't know the answer to, and I gotta figure out the answer for you. Because the nice thing is I figure out the answer for both of us. All right, I'm going to get this split open, and then I think our other piece might be ready to put together. I mean, don't get me wrong, you guys can, put in chat here what you're working on if you want to talk about it while we're streaming. But on Foam Club, you can actually show it, go into a little bit more depth. All right, so we've got this one split open. Let's go ahead and put this aside and go back to our first one here and check. Yep, it's looking good, nice and sticky, but not wet. All right, so be very careful that you don't inadvertently stick it together while you're working with it. Because if you do, you'll have to split it open and start over. I'll put this aside because we will use that again. All right, here's our wire that we put some glue on earlier. And it's feeling a little bit tacky as well. So now very careful. I'm going to put the wire on top of my arm like this. See how it's going up my arm? That way it's not accidentally dropping into the channel prematurely. And we'll just go ahead and split that open, lay it in there, and then just continue on down the line. Don't panic if it sticks prematurely. You can just pull it up off of the edge and continue on. Now as I get a few inches down, I'm going to actually start pinching this shut behind me so it doesn't pop up and out. And again, don't squeeze it really hard. We don't want to dimple it. Okay, let's go ahead and again carefully squeeze this together. Make sure those edges are lined up where we cut it. The better a job we do of lining those edges up, the more invisible the seam will be. Alright, continuing on. Take your time. As always, when building this, try not to get into a hurry, because that's either when you injure yourself or stick something together or cut something short in a way that you don't want to. So just take your time, be patient. Alright, we're about halfway there. Alright, I got a little premature stickiness here, so I'm just going to pull it off the foam. There we go. Bury it in there. All the way up. To the end. We'll go back up here, and again, carefully glue our slit back together. Alright. So, we now have a piece of wire running the length of our foam dowel that will allow us to pretty much make this into any shape we want. And I think I've mentioned this before, but it's worth repeating. Contact cement is immediately adhesive, but it does have a certain amount of time that it needs to cure before it becomes permanent. So when you're working with stuff like this, for example, if you bend it and start, torquing it too much, the wire against the slit, it could pop out if you don't give it a little time to cure. So I would, and if I'm not mistaken, I think cure time's like an hour. All right. So what I do is just set this aside and go work on your other one. But again, like I said, we can bend this to pretty much any shape we want, and it stays in that shape, which is really handy. We're going to be using this for control cables across our mask, but there's a number of different applications, even on things that I've built, with Iron Man suits, you know, little tubes. There's a Mark 17 Heartbreaker, if you're not familiar with the suit. Has a whole bunch of tubes running around on the front of the chest plate that that I took actually heavier copper wire and wrapped it in foam, a thinner foam. But this would, obviously this would work so much better. So much better. All right, I don't know if you guys can hear that or not. It sounds like we got a cat fight going. Yes, I have a couple of cats. They usually like each other, but once in a while they just don't. All right. So tell you what, let's go ahead and get our next foam tube set up, and then we're going to demold the bolts that we cast earlier. So I'm going to pull a length of wire here to match my foam tube. Okay. We'll go ahead and straighten this out as much as possible, at least to get it fairly straight. Doesn't have to be perfect. Alright, close enough. Let's grab our paper towel here. We'll put a fresh dab of glue on it here. And again, we're just going to take our wire and run it through the glue a couple of times to make sure that we've got a good coating of glue on the wire. Alright, did that end. Now we'll do this end. Just pull it through like that. And believe it or not, that is enough to just coat that piece of wire, just enough. I'll set it aside to dry, and then we'll run some glue down the inside of the foam tube, this little channel that we've created. Okay. I'm going to turn it around so we can get the other end here. There we go. Alright. We're going to just give it a quick inspection here. We've got a couple of dry spots. It won't stick together if there isn't glue everywhere, so we've got to just make sure we've got a good coating of glue. That looks good. Alright. We'll just let that dry as well. Alright, so for those of you who were with us from the start, you remember that we put some resin into our bolt mold earlier. And it's definitely been a half hour, which tells me that this resin is cured enough to pull the bolts out. So let's go ahead and take our rubber bands off, and we will gently open this mold up from the side. Alright, the resin's still a little flexible, which means it hasn't reached maximum cure yet. But let's go ahead and see if it's enough to at least get one of these bolts out, so we can show it to you. I don't want to break it. Yeah, it's still a little flexible. What I think we're going to do, I think we'll split this mold just a little bit more. There we go. There we go. And just a little tug. And there we go. We have a bolt. Complete with acorn nut on top. Ta-da! Alright. Yeah, I've been meaning to split this mold just a little bit more than it is to make that bolt head a little easier to get out. This one's actually okay. Nope, looks like we got resin on the top that mixed with the bolt next door. Let's go ahead and break that off. Alright, there's our second bolt. Let's see how this one is. Looking good. Let's pop that one out of there too. Bolt number 3. Got some more resin mixing at the top of these bolts. Let's go ahead and split this so it's easier to get them out as single units rather than trying to take them out together, because that would probably not work. Alright, there's bolt number 4. Bolt 5. And last but not least, number 6. 6 bolts ready to clean up and use. Put those in their cup. Just going to check for broken pieces. Of which we have none. So we'll go ahead and put our rubber bands back on. Prep for our next casting. There we go. And our glue, I'm pretty sure at this point, is dry enough for us to go ahead and put our wire into our foam tube. So let's do that. Now what I've just demonstrated here, as you can see, is moving from task to task. Okay. And the benefit is if you line up multiple tasks, things that you're working on, you can come back to and keep your efficiency working for you. So rather than just doing something and waiting, unless you have a lot of time to kill, then by all means. But in order to get projects done quickly, it's good to stage different tasks. And, you know, setting up the glue, letting it dry, moving on to something else, coming back and sticking it together. Doing a casting while you're waiting for glue to dry. And after you glue, you know, a few things together, you come back, the casting is ready to demold. So that's the way I like to work. I like to have a number of things set up. And even when I'm gluing, I'll go, you know, if I'm building, say, a large project that has a number of pieces, I'll start gluing components to, you know, start putting glue on the components that need to be stuck together. And then when I get halfway down the line, I'll come back and start sticking together the pieces that I already glued earlier that have dried. Rather, again, than just, you know, putting glue on some pieces and sitting and waiting for it to be ready. Keep things moving forward, as they say. Alright, so we're just, once again, just laying this wire into the channel of our foam tube that we've created. And then pinching it back together because we put a bead of contact cement in the channel as well as on the wire. And the reason that we put the glue on the wire too is so the wire isn't moving around inside the foam, which just makes it a more stable structure and less apt to come apart and work its way out. Okay. So again, once these edges are all joined back together, we now have a piece of foam with wire running through it that allows us to bend this into pretty much any shape that we want. Again, if you want a Z shape, you can get that. If you want a coil, you get that too. Okay, let's straighten this out, give it a chance to cure before we start trying to tweak it in any particular shapes. Alright, there we go. Again, I could straighten it out a little bit better than that if we wanted it to be in a straight shape, but this is good enough because when we put it on our bear trap mask, when everything is finished with the build, we're going to be twisting and turning it into some specific shapes. Anyway, so a little bit of bending in it now isn't going to hurt later, because again, as I said, the nice thing about EVA foam is it's pretty forgiving, which means you can bend it, compress it, stretch it, and it will, in a lot of cases, unless you apply heat, or in this case, something to reinforce it from the inside, it will generally come back to the shape that you, its original shape. Okay, so I think we're going to go ahead and wrap our stream for this morning. And again, sorry we got a little bit of a later start, but we will be, like I said, we will be starting later going forward just to make sure that we have, that we're sticking to a predetermined schedule. We will be back this afternoon, 4 to 6, and we'll be continuing the build on the reverse bear trap and talking about some new stuff that we're going to be doing. If anybody has any questions, by all means, don't hesitate to, even after the stream is over, don't hesitate to hit the timeline and ask your questions. We do everything we can to get back as immediately as we see them. And again, we do have a group attached to this page on Facebook. It's called Foam Club. You can become a member there. Just apply for membership. We'll just click you right on in. You can ask questions there. You can show off what you're doing, And we do have a YouTube channel and a Twitch channel as well. So if you want to watch us there, you can do so. And I think that's probably it. So everybody have a good morning. Stay healthy. And for now, stay inside, stay home. And we will see you this afternoon, like I said again, at 4 o'clock Chicago time.